A lot of horror and tension can be derived from the location.
I never asked for this.
Most horror media usually takes it upon the entities or characters to inspire fear, those entities or characters often defining their respective franchises. Who can imagine Friday the 13th without Jason? Halloween without Michael Myers? Freddy without the Fazbear? However, despite all these franchises being very good in their own rights, I believe that there's a much deeper, intimate horror in focusing on the setting rather than the characters. The Backrooms being a prime example of this. The Backrooms. The unease and horror in its original story could be considered cosmic in nature, centering around an inconceivably large, maze-like facility outside of reality, as inescapable as it is isolating, with only the final words of the short story hinting at the presence of something within its walls. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you. There are many other pieces of media that focus on the horror of their setting, the one I want to focus on today being that of rental. Originally created as part of a 2022 game jam, Rental is a game created by Lonely House under the Animita Project, a self-proclaimed art collective made up of multiple studios and groups from Chile, published by Astrolabe Games, who are Chinese by the way. Rental is also the Animita Project's first game. By looking at the screenshots available on its Steam page, we can tell that this game wears its inspirations on its sleeves, there being a clear aesthetic fusion of the games Animal Crossing and Silent Hill.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
Both games actually carrying a surprising similarity in focusing on their respective settings rather than any particular characters. Silent Hill could be considered an anthology series, with each game in the franchise consisting of a different troubled individual arriving at the town of Silent Hill, often looking for something or someone. The town itself is often filled with horrific monsters and locations that change with every installment, often representing the darkest areas of the protagonist's psyche. Animal Crossing is tonally quite different.
Just a bit.
However, even so, there still is an air of unsaid mystery and unease to the games, each installment often following the player moving into an unknown place comprised of residents that are very unusual. Not in the sense that they're animal people, unlike the player, but I mean you can take that into account as well if you want. Some of these villages are downright disturbing. Take Coco for instance, a supposed normal rabbit villager made entirely of wood with only a few holes in her head representing facial features. Her appearance is similar to that of the gyroids in the game, which by themselves represent Japanese Haniwa figures, which were often created during the 3rd to 6th centuries in order to protect the dead from evil spirits. Yes, very normal, yes. Rental seems to combine elements from both of these games, not only on a visual level, but also narratively, with the player travelling to unknown places, as well as encountering odd characters throughout the game, most if not all of them being emblematic of a greater, more personal story. The first thing you see when you boot up the game is, well, the title screen. A blue van drives down a long, stretching road, hazed by fog and surrounded by greenery. The main menu theme accompanies this image, providing a great amount of eerie atmosphere as well as perfectly capturing the feel and sound of Silent Hill's music. A pretty good first impression. Once we press play, we find ourselves outside of a small wooden house, dropped into the shoes of this rabbit girl wearing a pink dress. We are surrounded by our family, whose character designs show a clear inspiration from the rabbit villagers of Animal Crossing. Interacting with our mother allows us to learn a little bit about why we're here.
The door's open. Could the rental man already be here? Could you check for him inside while we unload the car, dear? He's gotta give us the keys. What a nice vacation we're gonna have.
From this interaction alone, we learn a surprising amount. We now know that the reason we're here is because our family has rented out this small house for a holiday, and we're also first introduced to the rental man, real name John Rental, who'll become a lot more prevalent in the story later on. From talking to other members of our family, we also learn a bit about our protagonist and how she's a bit of a dick.
What do you think, Umi? It's not too shabby. If you pay close attention, you can hear the ocean from here.
I can't hear anything.
Did you wanna play with me?
No!
Changed your mind?
We learn from these interactions that our character's name is Yumi, meaning sea or ocean in Japanese, which now makes me think that the dad must have been joking when he was talking about hearing the ocean. Even in horror games, we can still never escape dad jokes.
Yo, mama!
We also learn that Yumi can be quite blunt and even a bit rude in how she talks, something which persists through the entire game.
Oh, you wanna be a video game star? What would a platform game be without platform? How convenient! See ya!
Don't worry, it's not that annoying. There's also the van from the title screen here, which we can interact with.
Good old Suzuki Carry.
The Suzuki Carry Yumi's talking about here is actually a real vehicle, the van in the game most resembling the Suzuki Carry ST90, which first entered production around 1979. The way Yumi describes the van as good old may be implying that it's been with the family for quite some time now, possibly placing this game at some point during the late 80s. Going back to what our mother said, we're able to enter the house as the door is wide open. Approaching the door, the camera changes place, putting more focus on the house. This is our first instance of the game's use of fixed camera angles, an element both the original Silent Hill and Animal Crossing games utilized. You may have already noticed this as well, but Rental also employs the use of low poly models and visual effects to attain a similar style and feel to early 3D games, which the original Silent Hill and Animal Crossing were. Yet another element Rental takes inspiration from. But enough yapping, let's enter the house.
Close the door! Hey! Open up! But I'm the one inside. It won't open.
The door shuts behind us, unable to be opened. Interacting with things around the house reminds us why we're here.
I should find that rental man.
It's weird the rental man isn't outside the house, welcoming us in,
Hello, welcome! Steal your parents' credit card!
but instead needing us to find him, possibly only leaving the front door open as a clue of some sort. Or maybe he had nothing to do with the door. The house is strangely quiet, a great juxtaposition from the sounds of seagulls we could hear outside. Only our footsteps and the tickings of clocks seem to break the silence. It's really effective at creating tension, especially when coupled with the realization that the rental man could be hiding anywhere in the house. Speaking of the house, here is when we're introduced to its layout.
Welcome to my crib.
Moving on from the small foyer, we enter a long hallway. On the left is the dining room as well as 2 bedrooms. On the right is the lounge, the bathroom, and finally, the master bedroom, where we find the rental man.
You? Did you come from the outside? I've been trapped here for weeks, months. I don't even know anymore.
I need to get the keys. My parents are...
Oh, forget about your parents. You'll never see them again anyway. Unless...
Unless what?
You'll have to perform a ritual to exorcise this cursed place. Yes, that's it. I can't do it myself, of course. I'm just some helpless rental man, but you're a little girl. Who else could do it better? You just need to find these artifacts. It's, well, let me see. 6 crosses, a woman behind bars, some angry man, no, not me, 3 candles, and then...
What?
Wait. I think you should know. There appears to be a secret room somewhere in here. I don't know how to summon it, but some of the stuff is probably in there. Good luck.
So, what the fuck was all that about? Well, from what we can gather, the rental man is supposedly trapped in this house, most likely in a more spiritual sense, as he doesn't seem physically trapped at all.
Oh no! What's happening?
I've been trapped to for weeks.
He also seems to pop in and out of reality for an unexplained reason. We could theorize that this is due to more supernatural forces, as the rental man's talks of rituals, summonings, and exorcisms seems to point us in that direction. He also mentions a supposedly secret room in the house, which we would have to summon at some point, but right now we should just worry about collecting the items he mentioned. Yeah, that's right, another horror game where you have to collect X amount of things. Gotta be one of my favourite genders. In the master bedroom, we can find a key in a drawer beside the bed, and our first cross on the wall. There are also some interesting things we can interact with here, such as the wardrobe Yubi?
No.
Such as the wardrobe Yumi remarks as a good place to hide, and a television.
I wonder if 90s DF is on, but the TV looks kind of fuzzy.
So, not gonna lie, I was a bit confused about what 90DF meant when I was first playing the game. However, upon doing some research for this video, I found that 90DF often refers to the reality show 90 Day Fiancé, which began airing on the American television network TLC
Leave me alone!
in 2014, which completely throws my original theory about the game taking place during the late 80s right out the window. Now with this new information, we could say that rental takes place during the 2010s, or even in present times, as 90 Day Fiancé is still airing today. Oh, I wasn't too far off. This also means that the good old family Suzuki Carry is potentially around 40 years old. But I don't think this is the point of why 90 Day Fiancé is being mentioned here, or at least not entirely. Yumi mentioning this modern day television show also puts into perspective how old the technology in the house is, the television itself seeming to originate from the 80s or 90s, implying also that the house has been around for a long time now, and hasn't even been renovated since. The master bedroom has a door leading to the bathroom. Inside, we can find a small wooden stool which we can use to reach higher up cupboards. There's even a cupboard we can use the stool to reach in the bathroom, although it doesn't really contain anything.
There's nothing.
In regards to just interactable things here, there's a sink we can wash our hands in, the sound of taps running being heard when doing so. Due to how quiet the house is, this sudden sound may actually make some players jump. And by some players, I mean myself. I don't think it's meant to be a jump scare, but it definitely shows how good the tension is here if someone can get scared by a fucking tap. Moving into the hallway. This may be the first time you might get these visions of some dark figure stalking you, the screen distorting with a loud sting being played. Yumi doesn't seem to notice anything however, only remarking that she doesn't feel well. These instances happen at random throughout your exploration through the house, and while the first time may be a bit frightening, the fear factor wears off very quickly due to how frequent these moments are. I myself was never really scared of them, which is wild considering I was more scared of a tap running. Moving one door down into the lounge, there are some couches we can rummage around in. Doing so leads us to finding a candle for some reason. Who the fuck is going around leaving candles in couches, bro? If you investigate the couch again after you've collected the candle, Yumi says something quite interesting, which I'll bring up later.
Just some dust bunnies left between these cushions.
You let dust build up, and before you know it, you've got an army of dust bunnies plotting to take over.
She also remarks how weird the textures are for the couches, describing them as meaty. Not even the game is safe from Yumi's wrath. Yumi weirdly seems to make a lot of fourth wall breaking remarks, as she also comments on the windows being low budget, possibly also implying that they have poor textures. There's also a table here floating without legs. Yes, interacting with it causes an audio sting, with Yumi simply accepting the laws of physics being broken right in front of her. And while this moment is quite absurd and comical, I think it also does a good job at further hinting that there's something very wrong with this house. Along with the table, there's also a display of presumably the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus Yumi can interact with, undermining those depicted as simply some random woman with a baby. Clearly, she was brought up in a strictly atheist household. I forgot to mention this earlier, but in the hallway there's a similar picture which depicts presumably Joseph, Mary and baby Jesus once again. Interacting with it causes Yumi to denote the latter as simply some ugly kid. The Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ is just some ugly kid, by the way. Ignore the book. Ignore the book. Moving to the right of the hallway from the lounge, we first find ourselves in the dining room. There's a dining table here in which Yumi can interact with.
4 chairs, huh? My little brother should eat outside.
Bloody hell, Jesus. Along with the dining table, there are also, once again, some high-up cupboards we can use the stool to interact with. Doing so gives us our second cross. Going to the furthest corner of the room to the door, the camera gives us a good view of the empty void outside.
There's nothing there.
Moving into the bedroom next to the dining room, we can find some pretty cool portraits, one of which containing a cross necklace, which Yumi decides to wear, not for any religious reasons mind you, but instead for the purpose of fashion.
Oh, a cute necklace.
By God's light, I smite you!
It's completely optional, but you can actually wear the necklace, and it stays on you for the rest of the game, which is quite cool. Along with the necklace, you can also interact with a locked wardrobe here, using the key from the master bedroom to unlock it. Inside is our third cross. The second bedroom has the picture of an angry man the rental man was describing. Looking at it in more detail, it appears to be a portrait depicting Jesus. Like the last room, there's also a wardrobe we can interact with here. However, we don't end up finding anything, Yumi only remarking that the clothes inside are reminiscent of what her father would wear. There were also clothes in the wardrobe of the last bedroom, possibly implying the house has had residents before, perhaps even past visitors who had rented the building like Yumi's family. The clothes, in particular the ones that remind Yumi of her father, could belong to the rental man, as he and Yumi's father are both adult males. Not to mention the fact that the rental man has supposedly been trapped in the house for some time now, so it would be reasonable if he had somewhat made himself at home here. With all the rooms in the hallway explored, the only places we still need to look for items at are the foyer as well as the very back of the house. Exploring the latter first, on one end we can find a portrait of a woman, presumably Mary, behind a set of metal bars, as the rental man described. Yumi collects the portrait, but not without remarking how the portrait displays a weird taste in decoration. Once again, another instance of Yumi unknowingly flipping off Christianity. Opposite to the portrait of Mary, there's an astounding amount of fuck all except another view of the endless void outside.
Oh, poop.
Finally, we return back to the foyer, where we first set foot in the house. We can interact with the door, but doing so doesn't really do all that much, only causing Yumi to talk about finding the rest of the items. This might be a more reflective moment for her, the idea of being trapped in the house and never seeing her family again finally dawning on her. Or maybe I'm looking too into it and she couldn't care less, I don't know. Next to the door is a wooden cabinet. Looking inside gives us our final items, the 2 out of the 3 candlesticks. Collecting all the items causes the sound of a piano key being played. Walking down the hallway reveals to us what that sound signaled. A door has appeared out of nowhere, presumably leading to the secret room the rental man was talking about. If you wait here until you get another appearance from the dark figure, he actually stands in front of the doorway, perhaps warning us not to enter. We don't really know a lot about the dark figure or what his motives are. He doesn't even attack you or anything really, he just sort of watches you as you go about the house. Perhaps he's haunting the house and just wants you to leave his residence or to not further trap yourself inside. Whatever he may be trying to tell us, however, we ignore him and open the door. This place doesn't look like any part of the house. How such a place could is beyond me. We find ourselves in a dark, gloomy maze of some sort. Mirrors covering the walls. The rental man said some items may be hidden down here, so it's worth looking around. The atmosphere here is palpable. The fog remains, although seeming a lot thicker than it was in the house, and a ghostly drone plays in the background, once again perfectly capturing the feel of Silent Hill's soundtrack. Silent Hill or Piglet's Big Game, your choice really, your choice. It's honestly all really good and does an amazing job at making you feel hopeless in this seemingly endless...
Hello.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, this area would be really unnerving and all if it weren't for Yumi's fat grin constantly being visible. But anyway, moving around the maze, or what the game calls the Labyrinth, we really do get a sense of how big it all is compared to how claustrophobic the house was in comparison. This area seems to be outside the realms of reality, considering it would be impossible for such a small house to contain such an expansive area. This may have even been where the rental man was disappearing to during our conversation with him. Maybe having a break or some shit, I don't fucking... It's all very reminiscent of the back room.
Shut the fuck.
No, stay with me here, stay with me here. In the sense of it potentially being a large, maze-like expanse outside of reality. And like the original backroom story, there are no entities or monsters to speak of, just true and honest isolation. This area is also visually similar to the 3D maze screensaver that was available in older versions of Windows. The similarity is only strengthening once you realise that your movement in this area changes to when you are in the house, now utilising something more akin to tank controls, with you now only only controlling Yumi's general direction, as well as only really being able to move backwards or forwards. This being extremely similar to how the screensaver moved. Screensavers were originally implemented into computers to prevent whatever was displayed after a long period of time burning into the computer screen itself, causing irreversible damage. This would often mean that if the computer wasn't being used for a decent amount of time, a screensaver such as 3D Maze would appear. This may be similar to how the door to the Labyrinth is summoned, it appearing after a long stretch of inactivity on the residents' part. Collecting crosses and candles isn't probably considered worthwhile activity in that case. Speaking of Yumi collecting crosses, once we've collected all of them, another door opens inside the maze. An exit. Once we've found it, we can enter.
Hello, Dr. Freeman.
Okay, this is definitely not that. We now find ourselves in a black void, surrounded by large rocks. Our movement and camera angle style from the house returns once again, and once we move closer to the rocks, we find that there's room to place our items. The rocks circling this area, with the largest one opposing us.
Looks like I can perform the ritual here. I should place all the stuff I have in a circle.
We begin to place the items, one by one. The atmosphere is larger than life here, a male choir and twinkling wind chimes putting special emphasis on the mystical and possibly spiritual qualities of this room, whilst not undermining the sheer awe and might it also proposes. A low rumble can also be heard, possibly embodying the intense and oppressive feelings of dread and foreboding terror such a room and its otherworldly implications may impose. We ignore these feelings, however, and finish placing our items.
Okay, everything is placed, but what should I even say? That useless man disappeared on me. Okay, here goes nothing. Papiria, Perilia, Paporia, Papiritu!
After those very words are spoken, the camera angle jolts, putting focus now onto the large rock opposing us. The rocks begin shaking violently, and from behind them, we are now face to face once again with the dark figure from the house, now scaling up to gigantic proportions. The large rock which once opposed us begins to rise into the air, towering above us, until...
Hello? Earth to Umi. Seems like the rental man is not here yet. Might as well unpack what we can. Oh, never mind. The door is open. Could you go check?
I don't think we should go inside that house.
And that's Rental, everyone, and I gotta say, pretty solid experience here. Gotta give that a solid out of 10, very solid experience. The game is surprisingly really effective at creating atmosphere through its soundtrack, which I feel is only elevated more so by the abstract and eerie environments the player travels through. There may be no scary monsters actively chasing you through these environments, or jumpscares galore, but this game instead is able to thrive on the senses of dread and isolation that being alone might create, which I think is a lot more impactful. I feel this game is also able to stand on its own 2 feet, despite showing its inspirations quite clearly, and is even able to use elements of those inspirations to craft its own narrative and say its own thing. However, I will say that the game does have its fair share of shortcomings. In particular, its minor technical issues, general simplicity, as well as its moderate false advertising. You see this? Nothing like this ever happens in the game. This iconography of Yumi holding a candle never happens in the game. But at the end of the day, these are very minor flaws, and considering that this game was originally made to be part of a game jam, really puts into perspective how much they were able to accomplish here. The game is also free, so it's not really hurting anyone, is it?
It's for free! Free! No!
For a game as small scale as Rental, there's a surprising amount of replay value here. For instance, there's a second ending the player is able to achieve. Upon completing the game for the first time, you're given the achievement Back Home, which is only given when the player completes their first run of the game, implying that there are more runs to be had. If you play through the entire game again, you'll be greeted with a new ending cutscene, depicting Yumi and her family driving to the rental house. Yumi seemingly daydreaming about the game's events before they happen, not unlike what is implied in the first ending. Both of these endings have grayer implications in the game itself and its story, but we'll discuss all that later. Along with having an alternative ending, there are also other achievements you can unlock which encourage the player to do various challenges around the game, like what achievements typically do. Talking to all of your family members unlocks the We Are Family achievement, interacting with everything in the house unlocks the achievement Curious Bunny, short-term rental is given once you complete the entire game in under 10 minutes, making Yumi run around the house like the beginning of 60 30 seconds. Incredible Style is unlocked once you equip the cross necklace in one of the bedrooms, and there are also achievements for reaching the Labyrinth and Ritual area. There's also a secret achievement you can claim if you really love your family and talk to all of them twice, entitled simply, "We are family." Twice. And finally, there's an achievement for getting all of the achievements that grants you a shiny little Yumi trophy that you can put on your shelf. And with all the endings achieved and all the achievements achieved, Rental is finally complete. However, there is more to look into here, particularly with the game's story and greater meaning. The game could be considered to have two stories, the first being the in-universe story with Yumi being trapped in the house, and the second being more meta, discussing the developers of the game, what happened to them during development and how the game reflects that, both of which being inherently ambiguous, and mostly up to interpretation. Let's start with the more simpler story out of the two, that being the in-universe one. The in-universe story is pretty much what takes place in the game, however it's the endings where a lot of people begin to theorize and speculate. One theory that is commonly said is that the entire game takes place in a time loop of sorts, with Yumi reliving the events of arriving at the house and performing the ritual itself being the cause of this time loop, with the rental man lying to you and saying that it will exorcise the house. This then recontextualizes the endings, with Yumi instead waking up at the beginning of the loop, instead of simply just daydreaming. And while this is an incredibly interesting way to look at the game, I personally don't believe this is the case. Instead, I believe most of what is happening in the game is just Yumi's imagination, and she really is just daydreaming at the end of the game. Allow me to explain. There are multiple points throughout the game that signal that the events that are taking place aren't actually real. You could even argue from the very beginning of the game, it hints towards this, with Yumi's mother asking her to go into the house on her own to find the rental man. Why would Yumi be the first person to go into the house? Why not Yumi's mother or father, or even just the whole family together? If this was all fabricated by Yumi, then having her be the sole person to venture forth into the new house would make sense for her character, as throughout the game she often makes remarks that could be considered self-centered or self-entitled to some degree, such as refusing to play with her little brother, as well as not seeming to care when the rental man first brings up his predicament.
Don't care, still don't care. I don't care. Give me the fucking key!
Speaking of the rental man, his conversation with Yumi also hints towards the events of the game being imagined. This can be seen by the way the rental man talks about performing the ritual, the details of which seem made up, almost as if he's coming up with it on the spot. The time loop theory also agrees with this notion, but instead argues the rental man is making up the ritual in order for Yumi to perform an act of sacrilege with the collected religious items, causing her to be trapped in this time loop. However, I find it hard to believe the rental man is inherently evil or malicious, as nothing in the game explicitly hints towards the fact that he is, or has an ulterior motive. Instead, I find it easier to believe that the rental man himself is just a figment of Yumi's imagination, and that she herself is just making up the details of the ritual as she goes. This would also track with how the rental man describes the depictions of Jesus and Mary he gets Yumi to collect. As we've seen from Yumi not understanding the religious value of the cross necklace in one of the bedrooms, it's safe to say that she may not know who religious figures like Mary or Jesus are, therefore describing them simply as an angry man or a woman behind bars, like how the rental man does. Yumi still being able to activate the ritual despite not knowing the exact words to say would also make sense if she made up the whole thing herself. Not only that, but the rental man being imaginary would also explain how he seems to pop in and out of existence throughout his conversation with Yumi. A lot of the more supernatural and unexplainable elements in Rental, such as the spooky characters and places you uncover, are also easily explainable if you believe all of it's in Yumi's imagination. But I understand this may seem unsatisfying to some, considering now the game's all in the head and none of it's actually real anymore. However, what I do believe are real are the two endings, with Yumi snapping out of her daydream in both of them, now being too anxious to enter the real house, possibly due to worrying herself with her own imagination. In the time loop theory, however, these endings are instances of Yumi restarting the loop, the grin on her face not implying that she's off in her own world, but instead a sign of relief as she believes to have escaped the loop, only to find herself stuck inside once more. And while I generally think this theory is incredibly intriguing and gives an interesting perspective to the game,
That's one way of looking at it.
there's only really one issue with it, and it occurs during the endings. If you pick up the cross necklace from one of the bedrooms during the game, you will still have it on you during both of the endings. If this game was really a time loop, then surely the cross would be back in the house at this point, and not on Yumi. But then again, the fact the cross necklace is present in the endings also affects my daydreaming theory, as how could she collect an item in a dream and then be wearing it in the real world? Maybe this is just a continuity error or something. Throughout my discussion of this game's story, I've only really considered two theories, those being my own and another one I've seen commonly considered. I will say though that this game is most definitely up to interpretation, and there are loads of different theories and ideas people have regarding its story. For instance, I heard one theory that stated that due to Yumi sharing a similar expression to the rental man at the end of both of the endings, it was implied that the rental man possessed Yumi. And if you want to believe that, go ahead, no one's stopping you. This game's story has a lot of mystery and ambiguity surrounding it, only really leaving puzzle pieces on the ground for people to pick up and arrange how they like, which I feel is one of the game's biggest strengths, and has allowed it to stay in conversations for far longer than its total length would initially have you believe. But Rental is far deeper than time loops or daydreams, the whole game actually symbolising a deeper, more real story which can be found in Rental's supportive fanzine, created by Lonely House themselves. The fanzine itself contains a short story, told from the perspective of the 5th developer who worked on Rental, despite there only being 4 developers credited in the game.
In 2022, a group of friends embark on a beach trip with the objective of drafting their future goals and creating a horror game. The events that transpired during that remain shrouded in mystery. Upon arriving at the house, each one of us retired to our own corners in the 5 rooms available. As we unpacked, we encountered a series of objects with a peculiar aura. They appeared to be ritual artifacts of some sort, though their purpose remains unknown. We all worked side by side at the living room table, art and programming during the day, self-reflection in the afternoon. During lunch, unfamiliar faces joined us. They emerged from the rooms after we had seated ourselves, clothes covered in dust and the scent of naphthalene. That afternoon, a suited man sat at the table and said,
"Your game shall be about the house, so it desires."
No one acknowledged it, but we all somehow understood. At times, the hallways melded into a dark and infinite fog. When I dared to cross it, I walked what felt like 2 blocks. When I attempted to turn back, I was back in the room in 2 steps. Looking back, I think I was the most intrigued by what was happening in the house. I felt there was someone, or something, behind those walls, calling me. In contrast, the rest of the team seemed less interested. They were either oblivious or actively ignoring what was going on, including me when I interacted with them, when they stopped hearing me, but could still see me. I thought the game was monopolizing their lives. After they finished it, they could no longer see me. So I started venturing into the other side of the house, with more doors and eventually a labyrinth. On October 31st, the team began cleaning and packing their things. I couldn't find anything I had brought and spent the entire morning searching. When I found my towel on a rocky outcrop, it was already November 5th, and the door had been closed long ago. The team doesn't know I'm doing this. I doubt they even remember me. The game is something I still find hard to talk about, but some of its images are etched permanently into my mind. Though blurry, they feel more like memories now from my own point of view. Life in this house isn't so bad. I can hear the ocean. Perhaps you should come for a visit. I'm sure you would enjoy it. The house would like that too.
So, from what we can gather, the game Rental is actually based on a real home Lonely House rented out for a week in order to work on the game. However, during development, the 5th developer of the game, only really noted as R in the fanzine, begins to explore the house and its otherworldly qualities, their friends and fellow developers slowly beginning to ignore them as they delve deeper. This finally escalates to the point where the entire development team forgets they even existed, leaving them inside the house forever, leading to R possibly becoming one of the many unfamiliar faces the team encountered during their stay. From reading the descriptions of the house in the fanzine, we can see many similarities to the one depicted in Rental, such as both of them containing similar ritualistic items, both of them hiding some sort of labyrinth, and both also being generally quite foggy. I don't know how fog happens in a house, but ooh, scary weather effect, ooh. The presence of unfamiliar faces could also be a similarity to the dark figures we see throughout the house in the game, Yumi not acknowledging them but still reacting to their presence, much like the developers did. Speaking of Yumi, considering she was the one who found the labyrinth in the game, could we argue that she's a representation for the mysterious fifth developer? We read in the fanzine how they perceive instances in the game to feel more like memories from their point of view, so it certainly wouldn't be too much of a stretch. In Rental, Yumi also seems to make a lot of remarks that break the fourth wall, describing the textures on the couches in the lounge as meaty, and noting that the windows look low budget, possibly due to the fact that they're simply just textures on a wall instead of actual windows, certain things that a game developer may typically point out. Yumi also says something interesting in the lounge after you collect the candles and interact with the same couch again, describing the dust bunnies left between the cushions, possibly being a metaphor for R being left inside the house, R in this case being referred to as a dust bunny, further tying them to Yumi. Or maybe I'm just looking too deep into it, I don't know. But why would Rental even represent R and the house in the first place? What is the greater significance here? Well, I believe we can find that by looking at the art collective Lonely House made Rental under. By looking on their website, we can find a small segment which talks about what the Animita Project is all about.
An animita is a house for a wandering soul who died away from home, handmade by the people who remember the dead and wish for them to not be alone. This is what our games are to us, a digital memento mori where we lay to rest our ideas and mark them with a makeshift grave, for you and everyone who passes by to play with and, with a bit of hope, remember.
The story of Rental isn't about time loops, daydreaming, or even a mysterious rental man. The story of Rental is about a dev team, a group of friends who lost one of theirs to a mysterious house and had unknowingly created a digital memento mori for them in the form of the very game they began working on there. And with that, Rental now truly concludes. Apart from maybe some small details here and there, I think I've managed to mention everything I could about this neat little game. How far are we in now? Like 30 minutes into talking about a 20-minute long game? I mean, that's better than the Fjord video though. But on a more serious note, the last line of the Animita Project quote I brought up a couple moments ago, to play and with a bit of hope remember, speaks volumes about this game. Rental doesn't really follow the typical conventions of indie horror, nor does it even have a striking antagonist so many of them have. The Rental Man does not count, but in contrast, Rental excels at being a lot quieter of a game, not shouting at you to be scared with jump scares or derivative chase scenes, but instead just allowing you to sink into the atmosphere, the story, the isolation, the dread, the abstract, the unexplainable, all to form an experience that, while so short, can really resonate with so many people, including me. Lonely House doesn't seem to be too interested in creating a direct sequel to Rental. However, the next game they're developing under the Animita Project is Mercia, a short horror game that, like Rental, also seems to have Animal Crossing inspired visuals. This game actually looks really interesting, and I'll be sure to play it when it eventually comes out, as well as generally follow Lonely House for the foreseeable future. They have a lot of potential, and if you aren't already, I encourage you to support them and their work. Speaking of which, if you've never played Rental, I mean, it's free and only 20 minutes or so long, so there's no reason for you not to. What makes this game great can only really be felt firsthand. The link to the game's Steam page will be in the description below, and maybe, once you've played Rental, you too will also see the value of horror in location. But anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for watching.
Like and subscribe, like and subscribe.